I am NetMoverSitan. Welcome to the Abnormalities section full of abnormalities that are dark versions of familiar tales. You know those stories that some are read to? The kinds that get adapted into movies, TV series, and even into a certain action JRPG series. They're the sweetened versions of much darker stories. And in the world of Lobotomy Corporation, those stories are sweetened versions themselves of something much worse. Here's what to expect in this version of Familiar Tales. No singing and dancing, no internet memes, and not a lot of cheer. No Disney in this set of abnormalities. So don't get nightmares. First we have the Scarecrow seeking knowledge. Those of us familiar with the Wizard of Oz, either through the musical or the source material, will know that this character from that story was looking for a brain, and followed an American girl from Kansas, along with a metallic construct and an unrealistically cowardly lion who would feast on her without a second thought, if it was reality. Then again, neither are reality, and I'm going off topic. Those with too much prudence, or get a bad work result, will result in this abnormality breaching. Any that he kills, he will take their brains, which heals him. He's aggressive to those who scored excellent on the IQ test. Well, Mensa would probably be an all-you-can-eat buffet for this one. As for the Village Idiot Convention, they'd be perfectly safe, as they'd all forget to go, and even if they were escorted there and got there late, the only ones that he'd go for are the ones that escorted them, as they clearly have some intelligence. His head is emptier than the meat content of the storeroom in a vegan restaurant. He has a hunger for brains that would rival some depictions of zombies. After he was done travelling with a certain human, metallic construct and lion, he went to a city, which was unspecified, but it's likely to be the Emerald City due to the Emerald Roads being mentioned. Each city required its own technology, apparently to revive them, possibly after the wicked witches were vanquished. One city possessed the technology of advanced body replacement, which is quite advanced for that time. Well, either when the book was published, or the movie was released, where any failing or unwanted body part could be fixed, changed, or replaced. I think you can guess where this is going. Those that don't, well, I'm getting to that. Unfortunately, there was rumours that the poor were used to replace the body parts of the rich, and the poor would be left at the outskirts to rot. And just like anyone speaking for self-serving scum facing scandal, they denied what was said and reassured the people. How? By sending a few chosen sick people from the outskirts to have a body part of their choice replaced. One of them returned many days later with a visibly long scar over his head. He said to those concerned about his health that his head felt lighter, He used to cry a lot, but after his surgery, he looked blissfully happy. When asked about the others well, he felt nothing when his parents died. That person hung himself sometime later. The incident was silenced, even when some believed that the treatment was what caused that. I think he had a lobotomy. There are cases when that can cause a change to the personality of those that have that done. In fact, brain damage, especially as one of the more high-profile examples of this is Henry VIII. A jousting accident changed the athletic and good-tempered monarch into a fat, bloated receptacle of fiery rage, which resulted in 2 of his wives getting their heads cut off, along with many others that displeased him. The Scarecrow attacks the mind when in containment. When breached due to someone with level 3 prudence or a bad result, he will attack at melee with black damage and heal himself each time he kills. Yeah, clearly the wizard didn't give him what he wanted. Otherwise he wouldn't have to go through some extreme lengths to get brains. And he was probably the one who supplied it in the first place. He doesn't have a monopoly when it comes to lacking something. The Warmhearted Woodsman is also lacking something else. In that same story, there was a metallic construct known as the Tin Man, who lacked a heart. Or to be more precise, he wanted to feel emotion. Those with too much temperance risk the next employee that enters the containment unit to be killed for their heart, and then he breaches and searches for more hearts to add to his collection. That axe is not for show, and it has nothing to do with a certain Monty Python song making fun of a Canadian profession sung by Michael Palin. He uses that axe to kill his victims, as they tend to run away or fight back whenever he tries to take their hearts, like some Aztec priest performing ritual sacrifice. The wizard gave the Tin Man a lead heart, which did nothing for him. Apparently a metallic slave has no need for a heart, and he'd come all that way for nothing. This made the Tin Man feel anger, and so he used his axe to kill that fraud and take his heart, and then laughed at what he did, and felt pleasure from his act of murder. He didn't stop there. He kept killing more for their hearts. No amount was enough, and he felt despair if he loses them. Those that he cut down, humans to be more precise, he cut them down as if they were trees. I'm starting to think that the lion was killed by either one or both of the above, as he has one of each. I hope Dorothy and Toto got back to Kansas, otherwise there'd be another 2 targets after the wizard. For some reason I'm thinking of the song Don't Go Breaking My Heart by Elton John, as having some special significance here, largely because the Warmhearted Woodsman needs them intact. Otherwise, they're useless to him. When breaching, the Warmhearted Woodsman has slow movement speed but very high HP. He can use melee attacks that deal average red damage with a normal attack speed, although sometimes he will charge his axe to deal several red damage hits to the same target in quick succession, with the final attack slamming the axe on the target and dealing red damage, a high amount of it. So clearly, he can take the beating and dish it out. Although distance could help, providing the agents have a good enough weapon, and providing that they can outrun the Warmhearted Woodsman. If he walks on the corpse of an employee, he will pick up the remains and add them to his heart, healing himself. And I believe you know how this works by now, where it comes to either ending the day or suppressing the abnormality. So let's stop being redundant, shall we? Or rather, shall I? As it's not your fault. I'm the one who's saying this over and over again. What am I, a minister of propaganda? Next we have the Snow Queen. This is from the story of the same name, written by Hans Christian Andersen. The same story that the Disney movie and meme spawner Frozen was based on. She kissed those that don't have a high enough work result. 2 kisses traps that employee with her, and she must be forced by one with a high enough fortitude to prevent that employee from dying. The Snow Queen met Kai, a child with a kind heart who lived in the frosty winter forest, and then went on a journey after an evil fairy scattered pieces of a mirror in the hearts of the others in his village. Even through a blizzard. Holy he has a greater durability to cold than I do. Anyway, he wanted to know more about the world. He followed her to her snow palace. Once she was encountered, she then kissed him, which froze his heart, which made him immune to the cold within it, along with feelings of joy. Gerda had to rescue him. She was the only one in the village to not get stabbed by the mirror shards. She was less capable of withstanding the journey. She also received minor injuries, and it was sometimes too much for her emotionally. But she eventually got there by spring, when the conditions were much better, which also melted the piece of mirror in Kai's heart, along with the snow palace. She was eventually captured in a cryo coffin, which resulted in her developing bipolar disorder, alternating between crying and laughing, eventually found in a bathtub with her wrist cut, soaking in red with her own blood. That sounds familiar. Well, she was familiar with A, certainly. Apparently he used to be a kind-hearted person, according to her. Yeah. It seems that the Snow Queen has some connection to the bloodbath abnormality. And to A, one of the founders of Lobotomy Corporation. Oh, I'll be getting to that story eventually. Now is not the time for that. This is for the story-themed abnormalities. And no, I'm not going to sing that song. It almost makes me want to vomit. Let's move on. Next, we have an abnormality who is quite vengeful. The Little Red Riding Hooded Mercenary. In this story, Little Red Riding Hood was a girl who went to make a delivery to her grandmother. Unfortunately, a wolf heard about this through talking to her after she'd strayed from the path, and beat her to her destination, in order to not only eat her grandmother, but her as well. This version of that tale is much more aggressive, or rather, this version of her, a mercenary big on a bladed weapon and a gun. She can also be hired to kill any who are marked as a target, with a variety of prices for those willing to pay them. The payment in this case is energy. She also doesn't tolerate any abnormality breaching. When she breaches, she marks a target and will pursue them and attack them in the same way. Yeah, don't expect any mercy from her. She was previously a wandering mercenary since she was 15, and had a fondness for battles that would rival your average rabbit team squad member. Although, she doesn't work well with others. When she arrived in the facility, the management decided to take her up on her offer. Although with the next abnormality, it's personal. She loses control and is much more indiscriminate, even when this abnormality is the primary target. She has good HP and movement speed and possesses several attacks. Her target will have a mark, similar to a yellow eye floating above the respective entity, which she will chase through the facility until it is suppressed or she is suppressed, or the target is killed if it's an agent or clerk. Her attacks can still damage employees in the line of fire, even when her special ability is used. Yeah, that's one definition of, with a friend like this, enemies are unnecessary. Certainly if she can be just as dangerous to allies as she can be to her chosen targets, or rather the targets she hunts when a contract is made. Yeah. Certainly an unreliable ally, although not as unreliable as the Queen of Hatred. Oh, and as for her attacks, I might want to go over those, as there's a little more complexity than most. She slices either once or twice with her dagger, dealing bleed and red damage. She can toss her dagger towards a target, dealing damage to any in the path of it. And when her target is out of range of melee, she can get her guns out and fire them towards her marked target while walking slowly towards it. That deals quite a bit of red damage. She can also do a long-range shot. And she can also do melee attacks if she catches up with the marked target, and will chase them if they leave the room. And if she encounters the next abnormality, she'll go berserk, increasing her damage potential. And if she defeats this abnormality that I'm about to go over, any employees that were eaten by it will be released and given the ego gift called Sheepskin, that increases HP by 9 and decreases SP by 3. Which might benefit them somewhat if they survive the red-hooded mercenary. And that's a big if. Next we have the big and might be bad wolf. In the story that this originated from, he was a wolf that was secure about his transvestitism, both in the story and in the Shrek movies, and wasn't even slightly convincing, where he was eventually killed by a woodsman. The way that he moves is more like a werewolf, that is unable to become human again, although he can communicate. If he smells blood spilled by the Red Riding Hooded mercenary, he will breach. A bad result will result in the wolf eating the employee that works on them. Although an instinct work will vomit all the employees eaten out. It was implied that the Red Riding Hooded mercenary's grandmother was eaten messily, as she considered a victory celebration to be pointless. And when she got used to grinding an axe since 15, she was also able to cut her way out from within and escape. Grim, isn't it? When the Grifoff counter reaches 0, he will breach, as all have done so far, and when about to breach, a containment filter effect will appear with a picture of a wolf's face with its eyes glowing, followed by breaching. The abnormality's cute appearance will change into something a bit more realistic, more like a wolf with multiple scars on his body, sharp claws and glowing blue eyes. This one has high HP and movement speed, and when breaching, he moves to the main rooms of the departments to start his attacks. His next location is marked by a blue or red moon, the latter when below 50% HP, appearing in the main room of another department. Just one moon can appear at any one time. Yeah, that can make it harder for attacks to be planned out. While in the main room, he uses his claws or fangs to attack the targets. This is a red damage dealer, He can also perform a special attack where he runs across the room, dealing red damage constantly to the targets in that room. He also attacks quickly. And when there are not enough or any targets at all in that room, that wolf will howl, dealing white damage to the employees in the department. And if there's a red moon, it will reduce the quiff-off counter of any nearby abnormalities by 1, making a bad situation worse. After a period of time, he will flee to the next main room with a moon on it, turning into black smoke and moving faster to the next location. Once he reaches that room, he has to recover his breath, remaining an amount of time resting and much more vulnerable to attacks. And then repeats this until dealt with or oh, you know how this works by now. Although typically, it's best to not let it happen at all. So if you have to have either of them, make sure you have, well, either one or the other. Having both is too dangerous. Next is something to avoid if you're having problems sleeping. Even insomniacs would think twice before using this. It's Snow White's apple. Yeah, this is clearly from Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, where Princess runs from a jealous member of her extended family and is sheltered by 7 bearded men half her size, which doesn't backfire. It's after where it's the problem. Specifically the parts where she bites from an apple that makes her go to sleep, and she needed a prince to kiss her to wake her up. In this case, the apple had a mind of its own, and will cover the corridor with thorny vines that attack both body and mind of any that pass through them. When the prince kissed the princess, she coughed up the pieces of apple. What? The Heimlich maneuver wasn't known, so that had to do. After Snow White, the prince, and the 7 dwarves left the area, living happily ever after. Yeah, I know, cringe. The apple was revealed to be part of the witch, her wrath, hatred, solitude, and the curse she put on it. The enchantment prevented it from rotting, although half was crushed, and the other half was nibbled on by insects and birds, who were as lifeless as Snow White was, although it eventually grew branches and a body of its own, and searched for its own prince. When breaching, the thorns will grow, where the Snow White's apple dwells, and will remain for the rest of the day. As I said, slowing and damaging all that walk in them with black damage. She will then reappear in another room. To avoid this, it's best to have any results. Well, any results other than good will risk her breaching. So this is another one that requires a high temperance agent. Next we have an abnormality that's truly infernal, although he can be useful. It's der Freischutz. Well, set his head on fire and call him Nicholas. We have what is a darker version of Ghost Rider. Although he can be called upon to fire his weapon for 10% of the maximum energy gathered. He's an unreliable hire, and is known to shoot more indiscriminately after the 7th bullet. Also, the justice rating needs to be high enough as well, otherwise the whip-off counter lowers. Basically, the devil wanted to spare, which is why you shouldn't make deals with him, or any that could be considered that, metaphorically speaking. Despair erodes the will, the soul dies and falls down to hell, which is more enjoyable to him than simple murder. Largely because he needs their permission in order to do so. He received a gun from the devil, where the last bullet would kill the hunter's beloved, although the magical bullets will be able to kill anyone. He used this weapon to impulsively fight evil and help those in need. It's even said that he travelled to other worlds. Whether you call him a hunter of justice or a bloody marksman, it certainly explains how he arrived at the universe where Lobotomy Corporation is. The devil no longer lingered over him. This was because he was now a devil, and had fallen to hell. He now gathered the souls of others. His contract completed. Yeah. There's some unwritten rules. Well, largely because even around this time, there's some that are illiterate, which include never trust psychopaths and don't make deals with devils. Well, with that second one, it's because in the end, there's only one winner, and it's not the one who makes the deal. Oh, as for never trusting psychopaths, that's because they usually stab you in the back in the end. Usually when you outlast your usefulness. Yeah. This one is a cautionary tale. This one can be useful earlier on, when dealing with certain ordeals, and you haven't trained agents up to adequately deal with them. That and certain upgrades haven't been unlocked yet, such as shield bullets, or bullets that heal HP and SP. As this can pierce multiple targets and weaken them for the inevitable rush of agents to finish the job. Okay, I think we're done with this one. Before I make you look into my empty eye sockets and give you the mediocrity gaze, here is the next one. Beauty and the Beast. In this case, they're one and the same. rather than what we would consider a Stockholm Syndrome scenario. When those that do repression do so twice in a row, they will become it after the previous one dies. A beast full of self-loathing, full of despair, cursed to appear as a monster. Once a beauty with charming green eyes, who was unfortunate to accept a job as a manor of the Count, who was monstrous. Any who entered were never seen again. She came prepared with a knife, although she was hired and worked there without incident, and found no trace of this monster. She heard a voice at night that wanted to compensate her. You know what? I'd be a bit suspicious of the way that was put as well. She then decided to take the Count's possessions for herself. She ignored the instructions to enter the Count's room and found the Count was a monster. A four-legged blend of human and animal. She killed the beast, and it laughed as it was free. She changed into the monster. The manor was hers, but at a high price. Anyone think that Friedrich Nietzsche had a point there? About something along the lines of, beware those that fight monsters, lest they become monsters. When you stare into the abyss stares at you. Quite a literal meaning in this case, isn't it? I mean, what's good is having everything if it has the price of losing everything that truly matters? Right, on to something which is best avoided, even though they look nice. The red shoes. Now, these might remind you of a certain story involving a girl from Kansas, but these come from a completely different story to those shoes. It's based on a story by Hans Christian Andersen. Yeah, that Danish author gets around, doesn't he? I mean, who do you think wrote The Little Mermaid? Anyway, I'm going off topic. This raises a question. How can the male employees wear them? Forget it. Regardless, certain employees have a desire to try them on. This can result in a number of changes. Their eyes turning blood red. They're also unwilling to take the shoes off and lose all social and moral restraint. Much like the mask in the source material. The red shoes turned a kind person that was proud of what she did in Lobotomy Corporation into someone that looked like she had shot glasses of Joker toxin and not died. It also resulted in her being paranoid and violently jealous towards others. To remove the shoes, they had to cut her legs off. She died from blood loss. It seems that they brought the worst out of the host once worn. The shoes can sometimes enchant employees with a a low enough temperance to its containment unit, although they can be shaken out of it before they reach that. Yeah. The story basically involved a girl called Karen who was nice, pretty, but also poor, and had to go barefooted all summer and in winter. She had to wear thick wooden shoes that chafed her ankles until they were red. A shoemaker took some old scraps of red cloth and did her best to make them into a little pair of shoes. She intended to give them to her. She wore her new red shoes on the very day her mother was buried, even though they were inappropriate. But she didn't have anything more suitable. A large old lady took pity on her and wanted to take care of her. The old lady considered these shoes hideous and ordered them burned, and Karen was given some proper clothes, taught to read and taught to sew. People said she was pretty, but the mirror told her, "You are more than pretty, you are beautiful." I mean, did this woman have this stolen from Snow White's extended family? A talking mirror that can either inflate or shatter someone's ego? Well, probably just a coincidence. Doesn't make it less irritating. Now you might be asking, how does this get worse? Well, let's go into that a bit more. When Karen is old enough to be confirmed, new clothes were made for her, and she was to have new shoes. She went to a shoemaker to have her feet measured. And guess what shoes were bought, due to that lady having poor eyesight? The red shoes, which were inappropriate, as black shoes were to be worn at church. One day she met an old soldier with a crutch and a long curious beard more reddish than white. He dusted hers and the old lady's shoes. "Oh, what beautiful shoes for dancing," he said. "Never come off when you dance." And after that, she found herself unable to stop dancing until she took the shoes off. And the old lady put them away in the cupboard, but Karen put them back on. And the red-bearded soldier said, upon meeting her again, "Oh, what beautiful shoes for dancing! Dance you shall, dance in your red shoes until your pale gold, and your flesh shrivels down to the skeleton. Dance you shall from door to door, and wherever there are children proud and vain, you must knock at the door until they hear you, and are afraid of you. Dance you shall, dance always." And after that, she danced everywhere. And after the old lady was dead, she turned up at the house of an executioner and tapped with her finger on the window pane. "Come out," she called. "Come out! I can't come in, for I am dancing." And she pleaded with the executioner to, "Don't strike off my head, for I could not repent of my sins, but strike off my feet with the red shoes on them." She confessed her sin, and the executioner struck off her feet with the red shoes on them. The shoes danced away with her little feet over the fields into the deep forest, but he made wooden feet and a pair of crutches for her. He taught her a hymn that prisoners sing when they are sorry for what they have done. She kissed his hand that held the axe and went back across the wasteland. But the moment she came to the church gate, she saw her red shoes dancing before her. More frightened than ever, she turned away, and with all her heart, she really repented. Talk about a vindictive angel. If that was an angel, well, either that or a demon. Well, one or the other, considering what happened to Karen. As for the motivation, it depends on which one. Yeah, these shoes are best avoided. Although, for some reason I'm thinking of the movie Miss Congeniality when it comes to any of the male agents that put on those shoes. Then again, the agents are a bit, how can I put it, ambiguous when it comes to gender. A deliberate design issue with Lobotomy Corporation in the gameplay department. Yeah, I think that's about it. The final Abnormalities lore video is coming. Those expecting divine intervention will be deeply disappointed. Divine retribution, on the other hand, well, until next time. Hail the rabbit!